Hi, Lucy here from Designware. Today I'm going to show you how to use blocks to make your projects fully responsive. We're going to talk about how to structure things and how to use the options that are available to you in Designware. And I'm going to show you how to build this page without having to rely on any media queries. So before we jump in, I just want to spend a minute talking about a concept that is very important to understand in order to get the best out of Designware, and that's absolute positioning versus relative positioning. So if you're used to prototyping stuff in tools like Figma or Sketch or XD, you're probably used to absolute positioning. So that's when you have a canvas like this one, and you can add elements and nothing moves. It always stays exactly where you place things. And no matter how many objects you have, it's always exactly like you want. So that's very straightforward. It's like drawing on paper basically, and that's great. But the issue with that is that it only works for one given screen size. Meaning that if you're trying to build for mobile and tablet and desktop and huge TVs and everything in between, you're gonna have to do a lot of work in order to make things look exactly like you want. And the thing is, you can't actually possibly think of all the possible outcomes. So as long as you're using absolute positioning, there's always a chance that your visitors are going to see something different from what you designed. So what we apply in Designware instead, and the way software is actually built, is relative positioning. So it works a little bit like Lego blocks. Every time you add an element to your page, it gets placed related to other blocks around it. And then you have to tweak the layout settings to decide how to make the page responsive and how the elements should be placed within each other's. I'm going to show you how it works in a second, but basically what you have to know is that it's a little bit more work up front, but you only have to do the work once, and there's also way less design issues going forward because it's automatically responsive for all the pages, all the screen sizes, and not just the one that you can think of. So let's have a look at this page. It's pretty straightforward. There's two sections, one for the title and one for the three columns here. And if I open the page menu, I can actually see all the blocks that make the page. So the first one here, for instance, here we can see that there's a container, then there's a save zone that let me have the content, the title here really nicely centered in the page. There's another text zone for this little arrow here. And then we have this second container for the three columns sections. Another save zone, there's the title, and then each column in itself is also a container that has a media and a block of text. So as you can see, it looks good on all types of devices and screen sizes. Here we have mobile and tablet, and the cool thing is that it looks a little bit different depending on the space that you have available on the page. But you don't have to rely on media queries or view-specific edits, meaning that you don't have to create changes just for one specific view. And media queries are pretty convenient. We support them in Designware, but the issue with them is that it's pretty easy to lose track of them and you start building divergent views of your project, and it's not ideal. So today I'm going to show you how to achieve responsiveness without having to rely on any media queries. All right, let's get started. So we have this new page here and we're starting from scratch, but before we do start with this new project, it's always good practice to have your layout in mind. So you want to know roughly how many blocks you're going to need and the hierarchy between those blocks and how to organize those blocks, basically. It's going to make the whole process much easier. So in our case, we know we want a main container with an image, we want a save zone, and then we want text blocks. So let's start. Anything can be a container, by the way. So we're going to start with the top image that we're going to change right after. This is just a very cute placeholder. Then we want to add a safe zone where we're going to have our paddings, and that's going to help us make sure that the text and the content doesn't go too close to the border. So let's set that at 40. Great. Then we want to have a text block for the title, and then another text block where we're going to have the little arrow at the bottom. So let's add the content now so it actually looks like something. Okay, so now we have our content, but obviously the layout isn't right. So let's have a look at the layout options here. Under this tab, you have the size options, and I'm gonna get back to it in a second. You have the spacing options to add boundary between your elements, padding and margin. One quick note on that, you might be tempted to use those to try to align center things on your page, but that's not the right way to go because that wouldn't be fully responsive and these kind of things easily break. So what you want to use instead are the children settings here. So that's where you're going to decide if elements within a block should align in a row or in a column, or if they should be align to the left, center, if they should clip or wrap. Back to our banner, the first thing we want to change is the size of this image. Because if you look on mobile, for instance, it doesn't look tall enough, doesn't look like a banner, and we want it to take up most of the space here. So your first instinct may be to just grab this handle and drag. But what it actually does is that it sets a fixed height for your block. And that's not ideal because that's not necessarily optimized for all the screen sizes, right? So what you want to do instead is just change the unit here to percentage and pick a number. So what we want is 90% here so that it occupies 90% of the page height on all screen sizes. Okay, and the rest is going to be pretty straightforward. You just want to select the parent container. Remember to always select the parent container to edit the layout and decide how the children inside it are going to be aligned. So you select it, and then we want it to be a column so that this arrow is placed below the title. Then we want to make sure that everything is centered this way, and we want this arrow to be at the bottom and this to take up most of the space. So we're going to select this box and change its height to 90%. And then finally, I'm getting rid of this padding here that I don't need. So let's have a look at how it looks on tablet and mobile. Good. Okay, so now let's move on to the second section. So if we take another look at the structure of the page we're trying to recreate, if you remember, it's a little bit more complex. It has more layers and more containers. So we'll start by adding the top container here, just an empty container, and a safe zone that is going to be 1000 pixels and is going to be centered in the middle of the page. Now let's add the title and adjust the padding here. And then we want to add the container that will hold the 3 columns right below the title. No padding needed. And we'll start with the first column. So we place it inside the container that we just added. We're just going to add some padding on the side and below each column. And we want to add an image and a block of text. Now this section is quite big, right? Like ideally we would like 3 images on a row, at least for the desktop view. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to select the container for this column, and I'm going to change the size here and make it 25%. So let's adjust the padding and the content real quick. And now we're ready to duplicate this column so that we have our 3 columns. Okay, so now we're going to change the layout settings of this container to make sure the columns are equally spaced inside it. And let's have a look at how it looks on mobile. Okay. So the issue here is that the safe zone is set to 1000 pixels, and that's way too big for mobile. So what we want to do is start playing with the minimum and maximum width and height. So what those inputs are going to do is that they're going to trump the initial size settings that you have here. And what we want to do is make sure that the maximum width of this block is set to maximum 100% of the page. Okay. So now we have another issue, which is that those columns that we've set up, they shouldn't look like this on mobile. Obviously, they should wrap so that each column is big enough to be readable. And to do that without changing the way it looks on desktop, all you have to do is set a minimum width here for your column container. So you can open the page content menu here, make sure that you have the right container selected, and set it to 250 pixels. So this way you're sure that no matter how small the screen, it will never go below that, and it will always be readable. And it's always a good practice, as we just saw, to set the maximum width to 100%. Okay, and now I'm going to replace the images and the text with the content from the original page. So now let's have a look at how it looks on the tablet. It doesn't look terrible, but it's not perfectly balanced. So what we're going to do is we're going to head to the layout panel on the right side of the screen and switch the fill row toggle. That's it. That looks way more balanced and more pleasant on the eye. Let's check the other views one last time. Mobile first, always. Good. Tablet we just checked, but let's have a view at the total page, and then that's it. So that's it. That's how you use sizing and alignment to make your content responsive. It's going to take a little bit of practice to get into the relative positioning mindset, but as soon as you start using it, it feels very easy, very fast. I can tell you, as someone who spent a lot of time building landing pages, this extra time that you're going to be investing in thinking about your layout and things like that, it's going to have a great return on investment. And in the end, that's how you go from creating a pretty picture that you have to adapt to building actual software that works all the time on any device. So that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. I hope it was useful. Don't forget that you can use Designware to practice for free. All you have to do is create an account on designware.io. We're going to be publishing way more tutorials in the next few weeks, so don't forget to hit subscribe, and see you next time.